Ground Branch is a game that at the time of release revolutionized player movement and gun customization. It was set to capitalize on a growingly frustrated tactical shooter player base that Rainbow Six had pushed away with updates aimed at esports instead of realism, with gunplay that rivals the likes of Tarkov. Why is it that Ground Branch never quite got the player base other realistic shooters, such as Escape from Tarkov or Ready or Not, managed to gather? Today we'll explore why Ground Branch hasn't seen the success it could have, and why it is the game I'm the most disappointed in. So before we get into the reasons I think the game is not getting players to stay around, I want to preface this video by saying that a lot of the things I'll mention here isn't really the fault of the developers. Some of the guys in the team have more years in the industry than I have years alive. But ultimately, the gaming industry is very unfair and ruthless. It doesn't matter how many hurdles the developer overcame to create a game. I'm not going to play a game I'm not having fun with after a long day of drinking Kool-Aid and sucking on cam lights. Let's start by talking about the premise of the game, which is one of the things I'm really disappointed wasn't explored further so far. In Ground Branch, you're part of the paramilitary wing of the CIA. You're a high-speed operator that is supposed to change global politics, but instead you're breaking down random doors, trying to find someone that has a bigger tentacle porn collection in the C drive than Uncle Bin Laden had. Alright, we found very important information. Call the president.
Hey guys, did you know that in terms of male human and female Pokemon breeding, Vaporeon is the most compatible Pokemon for humans?
It's one of my biggest frustrations that the covert operations aspect of the game isn't explored whatsoever. I know there's a campaign coming at some point in the future, but there's just nothing in the maps you go into right now that would support something like a campaign right now. Reading the description of maps sometimes makes me more confused than before. This port is off of a redacted country? What is it? I don't have clearance to know what country I'm going into? I mean, I am in the CIA. There's nothing behind my actions that makes me excited to get into the game here. As a player, I don't know why I'm going into this scenario besides that I will shoot some bad guys in redacted country. Sometimes loading into a map is even worse. Going into this cave in the middle of Ukraine, I'm greeted by signs in Russian instead of Ukrainian? Maybe this is a secret Russian base. Well then why is half of the shit I look at in English? The keyboards are even in QWERTY. This field hospital in an East European country has a really good layout, but that's really it. That's where it ends. The scenery at first reminded me of the footage you'd see from abandoned buildings in Chernobyl, but once you play the game and look around, you see there's no details to observe. This map hanging on the wall is a political map from 1942 instead of a more recent map that would show the might of the Soviet Union, which would never fly in a country so proud of showing their territorial achievements. I could go on, but in essence, the maps are empty and lacking any sort of details a player could explore. And the details that are there are just wrong. They're confusing. They shouldn't be there. It wouldn't really matter if this was Call of Duty or any game that is faster paced, but because the nature of Ground Branch being slow, you can definitely feel the void of the map while looking for a laptop or any other bad guy. Intel gathering is a mode in which you are forced to look around to see if you can find a laptop, so having places that are just flavorless is even more felt since I'm forced to observe the environment to complete their objective. And most of the time, I'm looking at nothing. I'm looking at an empty wall that could have been decorated. I'm looking at a poster that doesn't make sense. I'm looking at English instructions in the middle of Ukraine. It takes me away from the mission. Besides that, there are barely any sounds that make you really immersed in the environment in certain maps. For example, in the city map, you are in the middle of a huge metropolitan area, yet it is as silent as the Sahara. You'd most likely have sounds echoing from afar, people on top of buildings observing and screaming at shots being fired. Yet somehow 10 armed Russians managed to silence white American girls. You'd also expect there to be more bodies, for bags to have been left behind while people run from the shooting. Knocked over tables and chairs, just chaos. But instead, when you go into the central building, it is cleaner than my own room, which probably says more about me than the developers. Okay, anyway, my point is that the game doesn't explore the covert operation part of this at all. There's no reason for me to replay a mission when there is nothing to explore or a reason to even be there. There are many other titles out there that just offer me more than just a shooter. And that's the problem with Ground Branch. It is just a shooter. It doesn't do anything else well. Tarkov is a great shooter with looting. Ready or Not is a great shooter with civilians and a story. If I want a game to clean out enemies from a map, I can play Arma, which has a way bigger selection of mods anyway. There's just nothing that Ground Branch brings to the table besides maybe being able to clean out empty maps with your friends, and well, the gun customization. But when it comes to the premise and everything that the developers build upon, you could have chosen Steven Seagal to deploy here instead of the CIA, and it would make just as much sense. Another thing that the game doesn't explore is different game modes. You either hunt down all the bad guys in the map or collect a single laptop for intelligence. I mean, hell, no wonder it's called the Central Intelligence Agency. I mean, how about we add more game modes? I understand that developing a civilian AI is very difficult, so things like capturing targets and such is not doable, but you could definitely explore other objectives such as planting explosives, sabotaging infrastructure, or leaving intel in random generated places while defending from enemies. Talking about defending enemies, a mode in which you have to, for example, defend a structure, such as the entrance of the underground area, could be a lot of fun. Having to figure out defensive positions to retreat, and at that point I'm really just looking at what positions I can get to go to cover. I'm not looking around the map looking for a laptop. And that would mitigate a little bit of the issue of the map just feeling so empty. Because the layouts are great, and the objects they put in the map are very well thought out when it comes to cover. They could really exploit that part of the game in which they're great at. A game mode like this is probably better played with more than a single player, however. So let's talk about the multiplayer in Ground Branch. In multiplayer you can play PvP or co-op against bots. Unfortunately, my experience playing co-op in random lobbies wasn't positive at all. Looking at other content creators and talking to fellow tech shooter players, it seems like the overall consensus is that you're very unlikely to find lobbies that aren't run by a 35-year-old cheese eater that has shot a Glock once in the gun range and thinks he's the ultimate tactical Navy SEALs because of that. Before even starting a game, you will probably have to wait for half an hour for a game to begin because the host is waiting for the lobby to fill and is enforcing a strict dress code. And you have to follow the dress code, otherwise you get kicked. Besides that, if you don't play exactly how they wanted you to, people will team kill you for no reason and then kick you. Not to say that the Ground Branch community is bad though. There are certainly times you find chill people to play with, but those are sadly not the norm. The best you can do is convince your friends to buy the game and play with them, or try your luck in Ground Branch discords. PvP lobbies are unfortunately almost non-existent. I have been actively looking for lobbies over the past 3 days, and I haven't seen any being hosted. It's important to note that maybe there's more lobbies once the update is officially out, which means more people will be actively playing around that time. But because people have no incentive to stay, they'll most likely just customize their gun for 2 hours, play 1 round and then leave, which is pretty much what everyone has been doing so far anyway. I'm willing to bet that if you are watching this video and you have Ground Branch, you most likely only open the game sometimes to customize your gun around, shoot it in a shooting range, play a mission or 2, and then leave again, up until there is a new update. With all of this said, there just isn't an incentive to replay this game. Maps are bland and don't really tell a story, which is a pity for a game that has the most interesting premise I've seen so far. After 5 years of development, the game has little to show, besides graphical improvements, some tweaks to AI, and the occasional addition of new content. It unfortunately is not a question of how good the developers are. They are clearly very talented and have proven themselves in this industry. However, it is a question of resources, and whether or not they have the resources to deliver. It is something we'll have to wait and see. I just hope that in the future I can change my opinion and be proven wrong. But as I see it currently, the game that had amazing potential has been amazingly disappointing for me. Talking about amazing, YouTube thinks you will have an amazing time watching these videos on the screen. So why not satisfy our overlords and watch one of them?